Parental fatigue, burnout. If you're feeling this, we get it. But there's one thing we use when we're feeling depleted. It's called Rehydrate. Delicious electrolytes that increase blood flow to your brain, organs, and nervous system, boosting your energy without anything nasty. Magic.
Next time you're feeling flat, give Rehydrate a go. Available at Coles. Hello and welcome. This is episode 15 of the Happy Families podcast. My name's Dr. Justin Coulson, and this is the podcast that's dedicated to making your family happier. In today's podcast, how to have a healthy relationship with your phone. We're talking tech, the way it's affecting our families, the way it's affecting our children, and even the way it's affecting us, the parents. Also, I've received a question for 3-minute therapy that I'm going to chat with you about today, looking at this idea of ODD, Oppositional Defiant Disorder, and how it works, and also whether or not reward charts can help a child who is really oppositional. We'll chat about that shortly. First, though, as always with the Happy Families podcast, it's 60-second psychology. The way it works is I've got 60 seconds to tell you about a recent study that's relevant to our topic today. We're looking at technology and families. And the one that I'm going to share with you today, I think you'll find really interesting. Once 60 seconds is up, Russell, my producer, is going to make some sort of unfortunate sound to tell me that I really had to have stopped. And that's it, 60 seconds to give you the science without all of the psychobabble and gobbledygook. And we're going to get started right now. So researchers at the University of Washington and the University of Michigan have surveyed 249 families with children who were aged between 10 and 17. And they asked about their household's most important tech rules and expectations, as well as what made those rules easier or harder to follow. When researchers asked children what technology rules they wished their parents would follow, which is not what you hear about all the time, the answers fell into 7 interesting and general categories. The first was parents need to be present. Kids felt that there should be no technology at all in certain situations, like when a child's trying to talk to a parent. The children wanted more autonomy. They felt that parents should allow them to make their own decisions about technology without interference. They suggested that parents need to moderate their use. Parents should use tech in moderation and in balance with other activities. They also said no tech while driving, no hypocrisy. Parents have got to practice what they preach, including at mealtimes, and no oversharing. Parents are sharing too much information. That's 60 seconds. I thought I was going to get there today. I didn't quite make it. The other thing that I didn't mention that parents were told by children was that parents should establish and enforce technology-related rules for children's own protection. In other words, kids said, we need some sort of supervision. I'll try and get it into 60 seconds next fortnight when we do the podcast again with 60-second psychology. But I've got a question for you, and I'm going to ask this a couple of times. What's the biggest issue that you face when it comes to your children and technology? You can leave your answers at happyfamilies.com.au/podcast/15, as in the number 15. What is the biggest issue you face when it comes to your children and technology? I asked a bunch of parents, and they told me this.
To keep them off the video games.
Probably limiting their time on it.
Keeping them off it. I guess probably that they know more than I do.
Kids and technology, beating and battling the screen tsunami. We're going to talk more about this right after the break.
Most children are born curious and confident. They love to explore the world, meet new friends, and try new things. But between the ages of 2 and 12, confidence often drops off. Why? And how can we rebuild it? Creating Confident Kids is an easy-to-read ebook for busy parents where you'll discover the 5 biggest mistakes most parents make that crush their kids' confidence and the 5 best confidence boosters for building resilience and well-being in your children. Creating Confident Kids by Dr. Justin Coulson at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families podcast. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. We're talking the screen tsunami, the internet invasion. A little while ago, I mentioned in 60-second psychology, a fascinating study about the rules around screen time and how kids feel like mums and dads are kind of behind the curve. They're getting it a bit wrong. By the way, I'll post the link to that study in the show notes at happyfamilies.com.au/podcast/15. So here's the situation. You're busy doing stuff. You send the kids off to their rooms or to the lounge room or the playroom, the rumpus room, so that they can amuse themselves and give you some space. And unsurprisingly, they pick up their screens and they don't want to put them down when you say, that's it, time's up. So what do? I stalked those parents at the school gate once again this week, and some of the parents said that their children are on their devices too much.
If you let him, he'll probably play 14 hours a day.
So how many does he actually get?
Weekdays he doesn't get much, but weekends probably 4 to 6 hours.
4 to 6 hours a day?
Yeah, over the weekend.
On the weekend?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
That's a lot.
Half an hour a day.
I asked one mum what she thought the best way to respond to screen time challenges was, and she just deferred.
Well, I guess my husband's pretty much more up to date on that sort of stuff, so he monitors them and sort of knows what they're doing and that sort of thing.
You just defer to him?
I just defer, yeah, completely.
So there's all sorts of different ways that we can deal with this challenge. I asked for some solutions to the different issues that parents are facing when it comes to screen times. I mean, do they ever say no when you tell the kids to get off their screens?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
So generally say that if they're not sort of obedient, they're not going to get it tomorrow. Yeah.
And how's that work for you?
Yeah, pretty good actually, yeah.
And here were some other responses for how we can get our kids off their screens.
We try and use a time limit where they know that they'll get 30 minutes of technology. And they can choose between their technologies, be it on the PC or be it on the iPad. And it works very well with my 10-year-old daughter, but not so well with my 6-year-old son.
Do you get sick of having to monitor the time all the time and you know, keep an eye on exactly how long they've been on and what they've been doing? Do you just sort of think, why do I have to do this?
No, we actually use the timer on the kitchen oven, and they know that when they hear it, that time's up.
He's still quite fond of the screen, but we're trying to get him off the video games and trying to get him onto Google and look into documentaries. Or what we started is we've started giving him some topics. Last week we did on a little bit of a research sort of a thing on aircraft and things like that, things that he likes or we think he's going to like. And we try to get him to go and find out things about that.
In this podcast, we're looking at how to make the internet invasion, the screen tsunami, less cumbersome, less exhausting and less outright punishing on our entire family. I mean, screens are here to stay, and our kids are all over them. They know more than we do in many cases, and they want to be on there. It's where their friends are, and it's where they hang out today. I was doing some research to find out how much they're using their screens. One study that I stumbled upon said that teenagers are sending on average 3,300 text messages every month on their devices. Girls tend to send more, apparently, about 4,050, but the average is 3,300. Now, I'm not sure how they collected that data and how they were able to devise the info. I'm just reporting on it, but you work it out, that's over 100 per day if we go with that average of 3,300. Now, let's assume that kids are awake for 15 hours a day. That's 7.3 text messages per hour, or one every 8.2 minutes. That's not including any Snapchats, any Kik messages, any Instagram messages, any Facebook messages, any Twitter messages, any Tumblr messages, any WhatsApp messages, and any of that sort of stuff. We're talking tremendous numbers of messages and social interaction going on devices all day, every day with our teenagers. Now, is all of this a problem? I mean, are we being silly as parents by telling our kids to get off the phone? And are we exacerbating the problem by our example? I think the answer to the first question is no, we're not being silly. The answer to the second question is yes, we're being a terrible example. On average, parents are making a lot of mistakes and setting and modeling entirely the wrong example for our kids. So let's go through 3 reasons that we need to get our screen time balanced well. Reason number 1, it's affecting our social relationships. I want to tell you about a couple of studies. There was one experiment conducted last year. There were 51 kids that were sent off to summer camp. This was an American study. Obviously, in Australia, we don't have so many summer camps. But in the US, these kids, 51 of them, went off on a 5-day summer camp where there was no screens, no TVs, no computers, no phones, nothing. Not allowed. And they were compared with 54 children who stayed home and used their devices the way they normally would. Now, both groups took some tests before and after the camp. And the tests asked participants to have a look at some videos and some photographs and infer the emotional states of the people in the images. There were no verbal cues in the videos, by the way. It was just silent stuff. After 5 days of interacting face-to-face with no screens, the recognition that the children have who had gone to summer camp of the non-verbal emotion cues was significantly more than that of the control group for both facial expression in the photos and also the videotape scenes. It seems like time with friends combined with time away from screens improves social and emotional intelligence in just 5 days. Here's another interesting study. Netta Weinstein, one of my favourite researchers, a Canadian researcher, did some work with some colleagues where she asked pairs of strangers to talk about what she defined as a moderately intimate topic. And what we're talking about here is an interesting event that had occurred to a person in the last month or so. And these two strangers had to talk for 10 minutes about this moderately interesting and intimate event. They had to leave their own belongings outside the laboratory, and they walked into this private booth. Now, within the booth, they found 2 chairs facing each other, and just out of their line of sight, but on a desk nearby, there was a book and one other item. Unbeknownst to the pair, the key difference in their interactions was going to be the second item on the desk. Some pairs had their conversations with a mobile phone on the desk, while other pairs chatted while there was a notebook laying nearby. Once they'd finished their discussion, each of the strangers finished some questionnaires about the relationship quality and the level of connectedness that they felt in the conversation, the level of closeness that they experienced. And what the researchers found was that the pairs who chatted with a mobile phone on the desk, even though it wasn't either of theirs, and even though it didn't do anything, it was just sort of out of the line of sight, they reported lower relationship quality and less closeness. Bizarre. They did a follow-up study. This time, they were looking at what was being talked about. In one context, participants were asked to talk about their thoughts and feelings about plastic trees, not very important. In the other context, they were to discuss a meaningful topic, one of the most important things that had happened to them during the past year. Once again, either a notepad or a mobile phone on the desk near them. Once again, the findings were consistent. When they were answering questions about relationship quality, their feelings of trust, the empathy they felt from their discussion partners, it seemed that the people who were having a conversation with a mobile telephone in the vicinity pretty much said, yeah, I didn't get the feeling that the relationship was quite there. The levels of connection weren't quite there. Now, I had a chat with a teenager recently who said she'd been to visit a friend interstate. They'd moved interstate a while ago and they missed their friends, so she went off interstate to visit with her friend. She said the whole time I was with my friend, she was just texting. She even went to the bathroom for about 15 minutes and took her phone just so that she could text her friends and not have to deal with me in the environment. She said it was really uncomfortable the whole time that I was there. But when I got dropped off at the airport, as soon as I'd gone into the airport and checked my baggage and gone through security, my phone started sort of, buzzing. And here's this friend who had barely conversed with her for the duration of her stay, saying all this stuff like, I missed you so much. It was so great to be with you. I forgot to tell you this. And oh, by the way, all that kind of thing. Relationships are affected by our mobile devices, whether we're in friendships or whether we're in families. And we need to make sure that we're not letting our devices affect our friendships too much and our relationships too much. So here's a question to consider. Is using my phone while I'm with this person going to grow our relationship or interfere with our relationship? The study in 60-Second Psychology suggests kids wish we would put our phones down more. Okay, here's the second thing to consider. How is our device usage affecting our health? How many hours of sleep do we need a night? Research suggests that adults usually need somewhere between 7 and 9 hours. Teenagers, by the way, need around about 9.5. When we go to sleep, our body produces something called melatonin. It helps us to fall asleep. Researchers have discovered that when we have as little as a couple of hours of exposure to the light emitted from our devices, we see our melatonin production decrease by around about 22%. So if we're trying to go to sleep but we're on our devices, we're going to struggle. In addition to that, we get stimulated by our devices, by our games, And with all of that excitation in our brain, all this dopamine buzzing around, that's a neurochemical that makes us feel really good. With all of this buzzing around, what happens is our brain struggles to relax. The screen suppresses our melatonin and we can't go to sleep. It interrupts our sleep. And then we wake up tired the next morning because we haven't had good quality sleep because we were up too late, we didn't get enough of it, and the quality was lower because we had interrupted sleep. Combine that with the fact that quite often we sleep with our mobile phones in our rooms, and during the night somebody might Facebook us or somebody might send us a text message, and that wakes us up. That glow illuminates the ceiling of our room, and we're not getting to go through the different stages of sleep that are so important for healthy sleep hygiene. While we're asleep, we need to go through the 4 stages of sleep. We need to go into REM sleep. The reason for that is because it consolidates our learning. It helps our body to rest properly. We go through a process, especially our teenagers, called something called synaptic pruning, which gets rid of a whole lot of stuff in our brain that doesn't need to be there. When we're asleep and we're going through these phases of sleep, our brain gets rid of a whole lot of junk byproducts. The physiology of our brain actually changes. Our body looks after itself better. In fact, sleep is related to growth hormone production. Our teenagers grow better. People who don't sleep enough are at greater risk of experiencing obesity and overweight. So it's more than just shutting our eyes. So what can we do about this? Well, here's a couple of ideas. We can actually put our phone on flight mode when we go to sleep. Or we can put it in another room so it's not going to bother us. My question here is using my phone now going to help me to sleep? Or is it going to wreck me for tomorrow? Am I going to be a better parent because I'm surfing Facebook or news.com.au? Or am I going to be a better parent if I just shut the thing off and go to sleep? And the third thing that we need to look at is whether or not our devices affect our well-being. Fascinating study. Joseph Cherokee, one of my former colleagues from the University of Wollongong, now at the Australian Catholic University, has been doing a longitudinal study for the last, nearly a decade now, surveying Aussie teens and looking at their health and well-being and their lifestyle factors and things like the way their parents are raising them. And he's discovered in a recent study published with 2,068 children here in Australia, following them from grade 8 to grade 11, that the more they use the internet, the poorer their mental health. But the reverse is not true. People don't seem to develop any sort of compulsive internet use because of poor mental health. It seems that internet addiction, screen addiction, spending too much time online leads to lower mental health. Here's another interesting thing. Use of screens increases through high school, but especially in the year 8 to 9 period. Plus, it interferes with capacity to study well, to get into flow, to sleep, to process information. All of this stuff happens at a lower level, which leads to poorer outcomes for our kids. So 3 things to consider. Number 1, technology does affect our relationships all too often in negative ways. Same with sleep and same with well-being. It affects our sleep and our well-being all too often in negative ways. So that prompts the question, is technology bad? Well, yes, of course. I'm just kidding. No, it's not. Technology is wonderful, but we've got to have some serious conversations about technology in our families and get our technology use right. So these are my top 3 tips. There are many, many, many more tips that I could give you, but these are my 3 favorite. I hope that they help. Tip number 1, no phones or devices or screens for at least 30 minutes before bed, and put your phone on flight mode while you sleep. That will help you with your sleeping. Number 2, if you try to do anything at all that's important, whether it's study or whether it's work, turn your phone onto flight mode. That way you can get into flow and you'll be more productive and you'll remember more. And tip number 3, if you're having dinner, maybe you've gone out with friends or with family, if you're having dinner and somebody's phone rings, they're not allowed to pick it up. Whoever picks it up has to do something uncomfortable. I know when I go out with friends, when Kylie and I go out with friends, if anybody looks at the phone, phones are all in pockets or on the table, screen down. If anybody looks at their phone during dinner, they pay for dinner. Maybe you can come up with something fun like that in the family. Whoever looks at their phone or their screen during dinner time has to do the dishes or has to do something else that's sufficiently uncomfortable, but not as a punishment, but as fun, to highlight the importance of keeping screens switched off. So my question for this week's a really simple one. What one thing can your family agree on to get the balance right with tech and not get swept away by this screen tsunami? You can go to happyfamilies.com.au/podcast /15 and tell me what you think. I'm eager to hear what's happening for you.
Dr. Justin Coulson is one of Australia's most respected parenting voices. His seminars have equipped and empowered thousands of parents to make their families happier. But sometimes getting to a parenting seminar can be tough. There's work and other commitments. Then there's the issue of the children and babysitters. Now you can watch one of Dr. Justin's seminars from the comfort of your own home and at a time that works for you. Sit in on one of Dr. Justin's parenting seminars as he takes you from confusion to clarity. You'll learn how to build a strong connection with your children, how to really understand them, and how to get discipline right. What your child needs from you. A seminar from Dr. Justin Coulson. Download this 90-minute seminar now or purchase the DVD at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families podcast. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. For today's 3-minute therapy, we're moving away from the screen topic for a while, and I'm responding to a parent who's asking me this. She wrote, "Dear Dr. Justin, my son just turned 5. He's always been energetic. We didn't know anyone with kids prior to him, so we always just accepted this as normal, but a lot of hard work. As he got older, his behaviour became worse, hitting, yelling, and so on. Towards the end of last year, we had a preschool field officer witness a meltdown which resulted in another child at my son's kindergarten being hurt. She recommended we seek some assistance. We did so. We did all the tests, did all the assessments, but couldn't place him in any category, but very close to the ADHD, ODD area. She recommended that we seek some regular appointments, but we required a referral for this. She said we went to a paediatrician. The paediatrician investigated and said there was nothing wrong, and then asked us to do a behaviour chart with rewards. This isn't new. We've tried it before, and needless to say, despite our best efforts, it isn't working. Our son's behaviour is getting worse. He's just started school. He's hurt several children and teachers and had to be forcibly removed from certain situations for the safety of the other kids. I feel guilty. He's hurting so many people. I feel guilty that I'm pushing for some sort of diagnosis. I feel guilty that if there's something there, nothing's happening because the paediatrician is saying nothing's wrong. I'm scared. He's a big kid. We can't control him. What are we going to do in a few years' time? I'm at a loss and I need help." So here's my response. And the first thing that I would say is maybe this little guy's just not quite ready for school. Maybe he just needs to mature a little bit. But I want to deal with 2 specific challenges over the next 3 minutes: oppositional defiant disorder and reward charts. And then I'm going to quickly turn to some solutions that will work. Let's start with the ODD. So according to the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is basically the psychiatry and psychology Bible, ODD patterns of behavior fall into 3 categories: angry and irritable mood. This is when a child loses their temper, is touchy, easily annoyed, angry, resentful. Also argumentative and defiant behavior. This is when a child argues with adults and people in authority and actively defies or refuses to comply with any requests and deliberately annoys people and blames others when there's problems. And then there's vindictiveness. We see this when a child is spiteful or vindictive. If they've done that in the last few months, then we would suggest that there could be a problem here. Now, for a child to be diagnosed with ODD, the child must have at least 4 of the symptoms that I've just mentioned. They have to demonstrate defiance with at least one individual who is not a sibling and have significant problems at school or at home because of the defiance. And it has to be occurring on its own rather than be part of another mental health problem. And it needs to be going on for at least 6 months. Now, there's a handful of other things to consider. I won't go into them here. You can look them up by Googling oppositional defiant disorder on the internet. You'll find everything that you need to know there. But here's my first question. Is this normal behavior for children, or is it brattiness, or is it actually a mental disorder? See, the great challenge is that many of these problems are really normal for children. ODD gives a label to challenging behavior. What that can do sometimes is it can allow us to get extra support. It can allow us to get medication. But my feeling is that such an approach actually disempowers both you as a parent and your child, except in the most serious of situations. It's really easy to just say, well, I'm the victim of this label. I can't do anything. It's a medical condition. The real question to me is what's causing the problem? Is it biology? Is it psychology or relationships or school or something else in his environment, something contextual? Because if a child's angry and defiant, this means that they don't like what's going on and they're saying something about it. Now, this is a good thing. They might be expressing their dislike and their discontent in some really inconvenient ways and even downright hostile ways. But we can work through this. Being upset about something doesn't mean that a child is disordered. It means that they need to be understood. Which brings us to reward charts. Many medical practitioners, pediatricians, and even psychology experts go straight to what I call the 1970s Skinnerian behaviorism, which basically means they rely on what B.F. Skinner talked about, punishment and rewards. And I strongly disagree. Here's a couple of reasons that reward charts don't work. I mean, they're the go-to strategy, right? This is what everybody goes to in the parenting toolkit. We need rewards, we need punishments, we need time out, we need praise, all that kind of thing. But rewards actually undermine our efforts to improve the situation. Research on motivation says that when you reward someone for doing something, there can be all sorts of negative repercussions that you might not expect. So here are some reasons that rewards fail our kids. Number one, it's all about parental power. You're the one that's pulling the strings. Look, it's great to have kids doing the right thing, but when they're only doing it because of the goodie they'll get, they're not getting why it's good to do the right thing. They're doing it because we've essentially coerced them into it in a sugar-coated, smiley way. Here's the second reason. Reward charts often lead to punishment and conflict. You think about it. You promise a goodie. But if your child, maybe you say to your child, if you can behave and not hit anybody this week, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be wonderful. But failure to tick all those boxes means failure to get the goodie. And that means the child feels punished. They feel like they're not good enough. They feel like they're horrible people. They feel like they can never do the right thing for their parents. And it looks like we're punishing them. I mean, now some parents are going to say, well, that's what consequences are all about. But if we don't offer the reward, then we don't have to punish for non-compliance for failure. And apart from that, the consequence is actually an external one that we're imposing rather than a natural consequence. You know, when you hit people, people don't like you. You get left alone. Okay, number three, reward charts are hard work for parents. Every parent I talk to says, it's so hard work. I've got to be on top of everything all the time. It's just one more thing to do. I'm constantly monitoring. It's just too hard. The fourth reason is that, and I think this is the most important one of all, really, reward charts ignore reasons. Now, as I mentioned earlier, what's causing the defiant behavior? Understanding that is far more important than trying to band-aid over it with rewards. Here's two more reasons that rewards are a problem. I think that reward charts reduce intrinsic motivation. Your child might be motivated to get rewards, but they're not going to be motivated to behave well. They're just doing it to get the goodie. Once the goodie's gone, the behavior goes back to normal. Motivation for what we want them to do drops. It's all about the goodie. And the last point, reward charts actually increase selfishness. See, when we promise rewards for doing something, our children are thinking of themselves. They're not thinking of others. Usually, what we want is a defiant child to think about how he or she can be more empathic towards others and more considerate of others. But rewards just increase the focus on me, 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 me. So what do we do? If we're not going to medicate, or at least if we go to try and avoid medicating, but we need help and we're not going to use reward charts, here are 5 tips. No easy answers, by the way, but here are 5 suggestions. First of all, I think it's important to try to really understand the struggle and challenge that this little guy faces. Does he need more time with you? Is there an issue with the school? Why is he angry? I mean, asking him probably isn't going to help. He's unlikely to know, but we've got to try to work it out. Is there something that's changed in your home life recently that's causing this? Why is he so angry? Number 2, build the relationship stronger. I mean, your son probably gets a lot of correction and direction because he's so oppositional. So spend time just being together and developing the relationship rather than always telling him what to do. Go bike riding or camping or walking with the dog or go to the park or the beach or go and kick a ball. Help him feel appreciated. Help him feel important. Build the foundation of the relationship. Number 3, try and develop some ideas and solutions together when he's not mad. I mean, help him to be responsible, to develop strategies that he's okay with, and help him when he makes mistakes rather than getting mad at him. Number 4, teach him about perspective. This is really important. Ask him how others feel when he hurts them. Problem solve ways, I should say, to communicate what he wants and what he needs without hurting others. And the last idea is this: just offer him choices within limits that you see as being okay. Often kids act out in anger because they feel too controlled. I mean, limits matter. We need to have limits. I'm not suggesting for a moment that there shouldn't be, but autonomy is also essential for well-being. I think that if you're in this situation, work on these strategies for a month or 2, then take your son to another specialist for another opinion. If he's really dealing with a disorder, then he needs specialist help. But if he's just angry and frustrated, he needs his parents. Okay. I shouldn't call it 3-minute therapy because I can't get through it in 3 minutes. We should call it 5-minute therapy. What do you think? 5-minute? I don't know. Up next on the Happy Families podcast, some final thoughts on the Screen Time Tsunami issue and a way for you to get a big discount on my 21 Days to a Happier Family online video program.
Are you endlessly nagging, shouting, pleading, threatening and demanding that your children behave? Do you live in a dictatorship where the kids are in charge? Time Out is Not Your Only Option is an ebook with discipline strategies and ideas that work. And they work without you carrying a load of parental guilt around all day. No more yelling, threatening, bribing or timeouts. From day one, you'll notice the difference in your children and they'll notice the difference in you. Time Out is Not Your Only Option by Dr. Justin Coulson. Available as an ebook and an audiobook at happyfamilies.com.au.
It's the Happy Families podcast. This is Dr. Justin Coulson. We're wrapping up our Screen Tsunami, dealing with screens podcast today. Fascinating research from the United States, and Australia lags a little bit in statistics, but we don't have great stats here in Australia, so I can only go with US statistics on this one. But in the USA, 82% of 1-year-olds and 95% of 2-year-olds are watching TV and videos on a typical weekday. 1-year-olds spend an average of 10 hours a week watching screens. 2-year-olds spend approximately 15 hours a week watching screens. And almost half of our toddlers are watching at least 15 hours per week. Now, screen time recommendations really strongly guide us towards keeping our 1- and 2-year-olds away from screens entirely. They're just not good for them. Now, I know it's not practical to keep them completely off it, but as one last thought, we've got to get the screen time balance right. It's unfortunately used as an escape too often. It's used as a way of just coping, and it's not a good way to cope. So hopefully there's some helpful ideas in today's Happy Families podcast for you to tackle the screen tsunami. I'd love to get your ideas once again at happyfamilies.com.au/podcast/15. How do you deal with screens in your home? Oh, by the way, I love the idea of using the oven timer. I've done that many times in my home myself, and we found that it's been a really great strategy. Okay, well, that's it for the podcast for this fortnight. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I hope that your family's happier because of it and that it helps you to grow as a parent and as a person. I also want to remind you, if you go to happyfamilies.com.au and look up the 21 Days to a Happier Family program, you can and you will make your family happier in 21 days. In fact, I get emails pretty regularly from people who are doing the program online in their own time who say, you promised me it would take 21 days. I found that I'm happier, and so's my family in just 1 or 2 days. It really can work. And if you'd like to get $50 off, that's $50 off a $97 program. We're talking a big discount here. Just use the code PODCAST, all in capitals, PODCAST, podcast, all one word. And that's a special offer for you for taking the time to listen to the podcast and participate in what's going on here at happyfamilies.com.au. If you'd like any more info about it, you'll find show notes and a whole lot more info at happyfamilies.com.au/podcast/15, as in the number 15. And once again, can I ask you to rate the podcast? Go to iTunes, subscribe to it so you get it every fortnight, and rate it so that people can find out about it. This is how we increase the visibility, and this is how we help other people to find out how they can make their family happier. Thanks once again. I hope this has made a difference. And remember, if things are tough, you don't have to be the best parent in the world. You just have to be the best parent in your child's world. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. It's the Happy Families podcast.